Club Room Backstage. Anja Schneider is talking to Chris Liebing, one of techno pioneers from Frankfurt, Germany.
Well, I started to work at Harthaus IQ because a friend of mine was working there, Tony Rios actually, and he told me, dude, you know what, just like we need someone who can speak English. Would you come over? And I remember really the first time that my first job at IQ Harthaus was taking care of the accountant. You know, I grew up in the 80s with the music, with The Cure and Depeche Mode and all that stuff. Mute was probably the most influential label without knowing, you know, because back in the days when you were a kid in the 80s, you weren't really looking like what label, like I wasn't such a label nerd that I was looking at the records like what label is this coming from. But I can tell that anyone who's like between 35 and 55 right now has been influenced by Mute records.
Today is a very special day for the Club Room Backstage because I welcome a long-time colleague, friend, supporter and kind of a mentor for sure, and one of the best German techno artists in Germany, Chris Liebing. I don't have to explain so much because I know you all know Chris Liebing. He is around since the mid-90s, worked for the legendary IQ label back in Frankfurt, had during this time already his first techno club, Spinclub, his own techno club, built then his label CLR, first named after himself, and later was standing for Create, Learn, Realize. Also long-time Radiohead with his podcast CLR, and now well known under the name AMFM. He made already 3 albums, and his last album, Burn Slow, 2018, was released on Mute and got me right away. I could make this list longer and longer and longer, but I want to stop it here because I want to say hello. Hello, Chris. I'm so happy that you're here in the studio.
Oh my God, what an introduction. Thank you so much for these really kind words. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much that you're inviting me to your beautiful podcast. It's great. And it's a pleasure to be here actually in person.
Yes, it's nice because we are normally we are not in person so often, you know, especially when you do your DJs and beers, you do it online, and it's nice to look in each other's eyes sometimes. I'm really missing this.
I agree. And you have a wonderful studio here. Like, yes. You guys could see this out there. It's such a great atmosphere. Again, thanks for having me.
So how have you been the last months and the last weeks?
I think we all go through different phases in those times. You know, in the beginning, everybody was very uncertain of how long this is going to go on and what's happening to us. And you go from sometimes more motivated and positive vibes and days into days where you are a little less motivated and you're not sure how things are going to go on. And so it's quite challenging times, I think, for all of us, and especially for ones working in the entertainment industry, because it's hardest hit, I guess, as we are the last ones, I think, to be recognized. We're not essential in a way, although I feel like we are noticing more and more that it is in a way essential what the entertainment industry and the entertainment culture is doing. So it's challenging times. It goes ups and downs, but also time in a way to reflect and to see what you've been doing in your life, in your career, and how do you want to go forward. I've been thinking about things like this too.
I mean, for you, it was also probably personal, psychological, because you are touring constantly since 20 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly from 100 to 0. This is a really hard, dark times probably you go through. Do you have a daily routine to catch this, to be happy?
I mean, yeah, essentially for all of us, it's been quite a 180 from literally one day to the other. I remember my last gig was, I think it was March 9th in Paris. And then you get home and slowly the understanding sets in and the realization sets in that this is not going to go away. This is like we have a virus to deal with on a global level now, where there's not going to be a vaccine for a long time. So there is definitely going to be a bigger change happening now, which is not going to be over in a week. And you find yourself suddenly sitting at home. Before, I'd say in a life of a touring DJ, half of your life was organized by other people. You were told of where to go, what to do, like jump in this plane at this time. You're being picked up wherever you arrived. You didn't have to think about this. You dropped in a hotel. You were picked up to the club. The only things you may have had to decide is what you want to eat and what track you're going to be playing after the other track. That's basically the decisions that you had to make for most of the time on tour, because everything else was kind of like organized sometimes 6-8 months prior to this. So you were going, you were flowing with it. And once you get home, you probably have 2-3 days at home. You're going to take care of some stuff. But I've always felt like when I was home that, I need to do some other stuff and I need to do this and I need to do this yet still, because I have the time to do this now. And you're not controlled due to a certain calendar that you have to follow, a schedule that you have to follow. And I always found these days getting home also quite challenging because you had to like make more decisions than only on tour, You're like, okay, how do I lay out my day so I get the things done that I need to do before I jump into the next plane? And then you're suddenly confronted with a situation that 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you are your own master. There's no one telling you anymore what to do. And you have no task to fulfill. The actual work that you do is over, it's gone. So I think I found the beginning was very challenging to find a daily routine because I thought that was like very important to have. The days that you just got up and you're just like, okay, let's see what this day brings and what am I going to do? Because we all do enough stuff. It's not that we're getting bored. I mean, we can produce music, we can do remixes, we can think about new projects, talk shows or whatever ideas that come up. But it's not like that you have a certain schedule to follow. It's not like at 3 there's a deadline you have to do this. So that was something that I kind of struggled with because so much time in my life had been already planned out. So you find yourself needing to plan out everything in your life from the first moment on. And I've learned that a daily routine, especially in the beginning of the day, is extremely helpful. So my routine, I started to learn that pretty early during the lockdown sessions. Because I'm always a very active person too, so exercise is important to me.
Yes.
So I started to like get up and I prepare my breakfast, and then I go for a run, and then I do my yoga morning routine, like it's just the sun salutations. I do some workout, and once this is done, I was like, okay, then I go to my computer, I check my emails, and then I make a plan, or I basically make a plan of what tracks do I want to work on? What remixes do I want to work on for the next 1 or 2 weeks? And that was extremely helpful. So to get a certain structure in your life. I've noticed this very much because some days I didn't do it because I was like, whatever, I'm just going to get up now and I go directly to my computer and I directly open my emails. And no. Your whole day is suddenly like all over the place and you kind of feel like, I didn't do my workout. And it's you learn so much about yourself, especially in my case. I live alone and my kids live 3 hours away from me. They're a little older. They're 14 and 11 now.
Oh, there's nice times now starting.
Yeah. And they moved away. It was even more than a 180 only from my business point of view or from my career point of view. It was more even a 180 because in February my kids were still living in the same house where I was living, and they decided to move up north. Which was planned for quite a bit. So they moved away in February. So that was like the first thing that I had to get used to, that I'm not going to be able to see my kids on a daily basis anymore, which is okay because the age of where they're in, I've learned, and if I may elaborate on that a little bit, when the kids are younger, you want to be in their lives, obviously, and want to be a part of their life on a daily basis. So when I went, even though the relationship with their mother is really, really good, but it was over for already 6-7 years, but we were still living sort of under one roof. We have a great relationship. It was always great to come home on a Sunday, take an early flight home, and spend the rest of the day with your kids. Sometimes taking weekends off to spend the weekend with your kids, because a weekend is a different thing than during the week when they had to go to kindergarten or to just go to school. So doing this was a very essential thing for me, to be in their lives for a very important time in their lives, when they're like around like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. But what I've noticed last year already was like, I took the early flight home on Sunday, and I get home, it's like, where are the kids? Oh, they're with their friends. They're coming home at 7 at night. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Maybe my role is like not as important anymore. It's just like you're there in the background. So this is why I didn't really mind that much that they moved away, because the moments we have now are very quality time. And it's not just like you walk randomly past each other in the house and you're just like, oh, you're there, I'll see you later. But in that case, they left Frankfurt. And then the lockdown happened. So that left me like being completely on my own. And I've realized I'm actually quite a happy person on my own too. Like I see my kids a lot. I go and visit them. But I've also noticed I'm pretty happy alone. I can deal with myself. I can wash my own clothes. I can cook for myself. I've learned a lot. I've learned cleaning my house myself.
I'm absolutely sure with this, because you really look really structured and really trustful, actually. And I love to listen to you. And this brings me to another theme. Actually, we were talking about the entertainment industry. We will be the last ones. And luckily, we live in Germany. You still live in Frankfurt. We get some support of our government. I mean, there are different countries. They're looking more and more difficult. But honestly, when I look back, even in our scene, techno and electronic music is so big in Germany. We never had really a big person speak out for us. We had the pop stars like, this Herbert Grönemeyer, Peter Maffay. And I was always thinking, you would be like a perfect person for this, because everyone trusts you. You are playing such a important role in this scene. Would be this a role for you, a new model? Would this be interesting for you to go even out and speak for a scene and to stand out for something, go more, I would say, politicians? Or you never thought about it? Because when I listen to you, I have this in my mind.
Oh, that's nice for you to say, but I'm not sure if I'm smart enough for this world, to be a politician. Maybe you have to be more diplomatic. I mean, maybe you have to see things from different angles, not just from my own little angle. But I think you're totally right. I think when there's one thing that maybe we can take away from this lockdown is what we're learning more and more now, and what I hope the politicians are learning, to see what's happening out there, especially with illegal parties and with like people going mental with drinking way too much alcohol on public places and just going wild, that they maybe start to realize, wait a minute, what they've been doing in this, especially also electronic music scene, that was probably pretty good and culturally very important. To kind of like get these people who are kind of lost souls out there now, like sitting on park benches drinking or finding themselves in illegal parties which are not safe to go to. Maybe they channeled this into something more structured. The nightlife is probably more important than everybody kind of thought, and it was very underestimated. I think that's one of the hopefully a takeaway that politicians even see, and that especially the government starts to see that we need more help.
We are important for the whole society, actually. If you don't have these places where you can let go, people going crazy, like you said.
Yeah, and in that way, I have to say, like, we are probably very essential in that case, and nobody thought that before. So, yeah. And when you say that, maybe I should start to be a bit more active and more become an activist.
Actually, we should, because I think we were really quiet, and all of us, and especially also these big DJs, they were super quiet, and everyone has this picture of this, okay, they're not suffering. They, we made pictures on private jets, on big parties, and now we are all in this situation together. So we are not on the best position to complain, but I think we should. We should be loud and be even for the people and for the scene. Maybe we should talk about this. I would vote for you, definitely.
Yeah.
But I want to come.
Well, thank you.
I would love to talk a little bit back. You started middle of the 90s, and of course in Frankfurt, and during this time, it was quite revolutionary because you started your own club. And I remember when I started to go out in the middle of the 90s, the people they made clubs, they were not us, you know. They were all a kind of a little creepy. What was your intention, honestly? You have such an energy to start in the middle of the 90s your own club. What was...
Yeah, it was still in Gießen, which is a little city outside of Frankfurt. Not outside, it's 80 kilometers north. It's a big university city. And I can tell you in one sentence what my motivation was. I needed to find a club that would book me. And I couldn't find a club that booked me because I was DJing before, but I wasn't really DJing techno. I was DJing like all sorts of music. I was playing Peter Gabriel. I was playing like anything. I was playing in a student club. No, I wouldn't say I was playing anything. I was playing anything that I liked, you know. And I started doing a Thursday night in a student club, which was open till 3 at night every Thursday. From 91 until 93, 2 years, I played every Thursday. It was my first it was my first residency ever, and it was kind of the first time that I ever made money with DJing, you know. I remember you had 50 marks. You got 50 marks for, exactly different than now. It was great. I loved playing that music, but the more I DJ'd, and because you were a little bit left outside the whole Frankfurt techno scene that was evolving in the beginning of the 90s, in 90, 91, 92, which is another story in itself, how that developed there. We're in Gießen, we're a little bit on our own little planet. Although we had a great nightlife in Gießen in the 80s, it was so good that actually people from Frankfurt came to Gießen to party because we had some really outstanding DJs back then there that were very, very good, very influential DJs. And kind of like in the middle of the 90s, it died out a little bit. I was still stuck in Gießen.
You moved to IQ then, in the middle of the 90s?
Yeah, once I had to close the club down, I went to IQ. And so I started to more and more get into techno in 92, 93, especially because of IQ Records as well. Hard House IQ Records. And I got more into techno. But the club where I was playing wasn't really happy for me to play techno. So I knew as if I want to evolve as a DJ and I want to keep doing this, I probably want to play a techno night the whole night long. And it was actually that same club that wanted to close down and told me, it's like, if you want to continue that club under your responsibility, you pay us the rent every month, you'll turn it into something you want to do. And I was like, all right, I'm only studying anyways. I don't care. Let's do this. And I can book myself and I can give myself the Saturday night and it's going to be a techno night because I'm going to be able to play whatever I want to do the whole night. And that was great. I loved it. The club was a financial disaster because I'm not a businessman, and I gave out free beers to everyone I knew, and in Gießen you know everyone. And after 1.5 years, I had to close down because it was just not making enough money to be sustainable, and I had a little bit of debt already piled up, and that was the moment where I felt like I tried everything I could here in this town where I was. It was a great thing to do for me, but I need to move on. And that's where the opportunity to work at IQ Hard House in Offenbach.
Yeah, this was the label from Sven Vath, actually, also built in the beginning of the 90s. For me, really important and really a label what had a lot of impact of my music back there.
Yeah, same here.
But how was it with Sven Vath? I mean, even Frankfurt has like a special position, because back in the days, I think we have to explain it a little bit. There was always in Germany this little fight between these cities, Frankfurt, Berlin. Okay, Munich was not really on the map, but Frankfurt and Berlin was the biggest fight. Who invented techno? So there was a harsh tone, let's say it like this. But how was it with you, with Sven? Because I can imagine Sven is not the kind of person who likes someone who is beside of him who's on the same level. Let's say it friendly.
I would never, ever claim in my life that I was ever at the same level with Sven. No one really is. He's completely in his own a phenomenon in his own right. And what he's created in Frankfurt, I think I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't what he has been creating in Frankfurt in this music scene. And you're talking about the the competition that was going on between Berlin and Frankfurt, very visible during like the early love parades as well. Oh, the Frankfurt truckers come in, and it was kind of like fun in a way, but then again, in a way, also a little bit serious, you know. I mean, obviously, over the years, you know who won that fight because Frankfurt literally has nothing left. Everybody left to Berlin in a way. I'm still in Frankfurt somehow. And yeah, well, I started to work at Harthaus IQ because a friend of mine was working there, Tony Rios actually, and he told me, dude, you know what? Just like we need someone who can speak English. Would you come over? And I was like, all right, I'll just check it out. And I remember really the first time that my first job at IQ Harthaus was taking care of the accountant.
Oh, really?
Me of all people.
You're not a businessman, you said before.
Yeah, exactly. You know why this label doesn't exist anymore, but the accounting for the artists. And I remember the first time actually, because the thing is the Omen Club was open for quite a while, but because I was a DJ and I had my own club, I never went to Frankfurt to go.
Yeah, of course.
I've never been to the Omen Club. So I knew of Sven Vath, of course. I never met him before. I've never been to the clubs. And then I find myself in these office spaces.
Yeah, and then he let you play in Omen to support him, actually.
Yeah, that's if you have a moment, I can tell you that story.
I have all the moments.
I remember the first time I met Sven because he came into my little office where I was sitting and he was just like, "Hi, I'm Sven. Because you are Chris." Back then, actually, my name is Christoph, and everybody still called me Christoph. It's a weird thing with my name. And he was like, "All right, you're doing the numbers here. Tell me now, what are the sales of the last album?" Because he was also connected with Warner Music. His albums were going through Warner Music, and there were. And I remember I was just sitting there, like kind of shaking, nervous, like, "Oh my God, this is Sven Vath asking me for some random numbers." I don't even think he knew I was a DJ. You know, it was just a random new dude working at his company. Yeah. And fast forward a little bit, there was probably there must have been sort of around beginning of 95. I closed the club down or let's say May 95. And I worked there and I continued playing as a DJ because I made myself kind of a name as a techno DJ locally in Gießen. And there were some clubs in Marburg and all these places where I kind of found new residencies and I played every weekend. So again, I never had the chance to go to Frankfurt to go out really, because I was always kind of busy in the little area I was in. And I remember one night it must have been September in that same year, 95, the Omen Club had certain residents playing and obviously invited various guests. And there was a Friday night which was hosted by Pauli and Good Groove. Pauli and Good Groove were the A&Rs of Harthaus. Good Groove, may his soul rest in peace. Yes. And we all know Pauli, he's still active in Frankfurt. And I used to do a radio show with him too later on in the 2000s.
I just saw him at Wer wird Millionär.
Oh, really?
Yes,
oh, yeah, right.
There.
He was there too. That's true.
Sorry.
Yeah, another German TV show. And I remember I was sitting there one Friday night in the office, and Good Groove came into my office, and he was like, "Oh my God, Pauli and I are supposed to play in the Omen tonight, but Pauli is really sick. He can't play." And I literally asked everyone to like come in and play because I don't want to play all night long because the Omen was open from 11 till whenever.
3 days later.
In the middle of Frankfurt, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And he was like, I asked Tony Rios, I asked Frank Glauber, I asked Pascal Feos, I asked like everyone you knew from this area, you know, and everybody has some gig somewhere and nobody can come. You're a DJ, right? You do DJ. And I was like, yeah. Could you come and just play the first 2 hours so I don't really have to be there from the beginning? Is that okay? And I'm like, sure, that's okay. I'll do this. So I remember I actually couldn't find the club because I always missed the entrance, the right way to drive there. In Frankfurt, it's a little bit, if you're not from Frankfurt, it's sometimes a little complicated. But I ended up going there. I ended up starting to play. And I remember the people came in and, you know, and that's a good thing that like this situation taught me one thing is like, sometimes it's a good thing that you're not too involved. You're coming in from the outside and you're doing your thing. I didn't know what the others were playing in this club. I had no idea what's going on. I remember the light guy was standing next to me, Michael Hoffmann. Yeah. And he looked at me and he was like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Well, Klaus asked me to play in the beginning." Everybody was like, really like, who are you? Where are you coming from? And I was like, Klaus asked me, I'm okay, I can be here. And I was super, super shy and nervous. I went down, I remember, saw the managers, and they were like, all right, ask the light guy, he can tell you more. And I remember it was always a thing in the Omen that at a certain point between, like, let's say 12:30 and 1:30, there was enough people in the room that the light guy was basically telling the person, the warm-up DJ in that sense, like, okay, you need to find within the next 15 minutes now a track that brings everybody on the dance floor, and then I'm going to dim the lights a little bit more. And this is your task now. Like, there's enough people in the room now. If you don't get them all on the dance floor now, you suck. Yeah.
Oh my God. A lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, it was kind
interesting. This was cool, yeah. But I never been to Omen, but it was one of the legendary clubs we had.
It was seriously legendary, yes. And I kind of managed, and then I remember Klaus came, and he was standing behind me, and he was happy, and he was like, you know what, keep going, play a little longer. And I ended up playing, I think, till 4.
And then you were
I walked down to the office, and the guys were like, yeah, go down to the office, you get your money. I'm like, what? I get money for this? That's amazing. So I walked down, and they were like, it was pre-mobile phone days and everything, you know. So, and they were like, you know, we heard good things. I think you did well up there. Could you have your phone number and we might call you to come back again? I'm like, oh, of course, sure. And I remember they called me the same week again, and I had to basically warm up for DJ Duck on a Saturday night on that following Saturday then. And in that moment, I became a resident DJ. And it's funny that you were saying, like, because of Sven, like, well, how was it if, like, wasn't he watching over everything? Yeah. And it's really interesting because one of the owners of that club is Matthias Martinsson, also quite a well-known figure in Frankfurt nightlife. And I saw him just 3 months ago in Frankfurt, and we had a beer together. And it was funny because I was sitting next to him, and I was like, Matthias, did you actually ever acknowledged or did anyone say, yes, we have Chris as a new resident at the club?
No.
And he's like, no. Do you actually know why I became a resident? He's like, no. And the same thing what happened with Sven. Nobody knew that I was doing this because I did it directly with the managers, and they would just keep calling me without asking for permission from either the owner or Sven. And by the time they put me on the flyer, I think that happened already in November. I have a flyer from November 95 where I was on the flyer for the first time. None of them had ever given their permission to a new resident. It was just basically the management. And by that time, it was too late to say, like, hey, do we have a word in this? You know? And I was kind of nice guy, so everybody was kind of fine with it. And I actually told that story to Matthias, and Matthias was like, I had no idea. I never understood why you became actually a resident of this club, because nobody ever asked me. I was like, that's how you sneak into a club. But it was a really important moment in my career, actually, because obviously opened a whole new world. I started playing quite a lot at the Omen because you were a resident DJ at the Omen. It was suddenly you were a thought after DJ for other places in Germany. You know, like they could put in, we have this DJ from Omen in Frankfurt playing. Yes, and suddenly you started to have more gigs.
Crazy. So this all started there. Yeah,
and then you have inspiration of new music to produce, because I was getting more and more into producing music in 95 too. And to do all things, you got to know. That's another big factor. That's why it's so great to have a residency like this. All these guest DJs that come in, you get to know them. You know, this is how I started to get to know Adam Bayer, the Advent, all these people, because you were suddenly involved. And it was a big step in my career to do that move. And it all kind of like...
I think this things never changed, probably. This things never changed, even for this resident DJs today. Nowadays, it's quite important. But you moved on. You built your own night, and you built also your special, unique sound. And I was really surprised because I read today something. It was called Schranz during this time. And I read, and I had no idea that all the years that this wording came actually from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. I thought it was like a... Yes?
I can't take all the credit because I was always, just like you, I was always very interested in radio.
Yes, you did.
If I quickly, because you were saying so many nice things about me in the introduction, I have to tell you that one story that I think it must have been Love Parade 96, but correct me if I'm wrong which one that was. But you hosted that boat... Crazy.
This was 93, actually. 93, 94, 96. And we had several. I hosted it 10 years, but on the boat was the first year, 93 or 94, something like this.
Yeah, but I think for me, it was I think it was 96, because my first Love Parade where I ever went to, just not even DJing, was 95. And then 96, I was I was invited by you to play.
Yes, I know.
And I was like, my mind blew. It's like, my God, Anja, like, because you had that radio show, you were already having like such a name for yourself in Berlin.
Now I'm getting red.
and I was like, oh my God, I'm able to play there. I think it was just an hour gig. And
we had 60 hours and every DJ played 1 hour and almost everyone played there.
There was so many people in front of the boat. You had to find your way in. Everything was sweaty and dripping and it was sensational.
Oh, I missed this.
I totally remember that day. It's just so good I just wanted to, what was the original question?
The original, I wanted to talk with you about trance and I had no idea that it was your word. But now, for me, it's quite interesting. If you look back from your history, when you look today, I mean, techno, hard techno, industrial techno is so popular right now. What you are thinking about this, actually, as an inventor for this? Are you liking this? Are you looking like a little bit from the outside, like the old Muppets show guy?
Honestly, I didn't invent anything, but maybe a name for that thing. Because as I told you, I love to do radio. So 97, a satellite radio station was starting. It was called Evosonic Radio.
Yes.
It was done by Mike S. And he offered me a show in 97. The station was located in Cologne. And so between 97 and 99, I basically ran a 4-hour show every Friday from 3 till 7. A 4-hour show from 3 to 7. Because I remember this, I always had to leave Frankfurt latest at 1 because the drive was 1.5 hours and I should never be late, for your radio show. And I had a friend from Frankfurt, To, who back then also ran a label, Triebtäter, and he sometimes joined me on these rides. And I remember that I was really into, especially like the English sound of techno, the industrial English sound of techno, like Regis, Female, Surgeon, all that stuff, especially back like around in 97. And, it was all just sorted as techno. And I remember I played a lot of that music in the radio show. And I remember To was like sitting behind me. It's like, it's really like in a German, of course, but it's shredded. It's shredding. It's shredding really good. Yeah, it's Schranzing, Schranz. It's like, yeah, guys, we're doing some Schranz here. I was just saying this in the microphone. People were listening to it. So from that moment, it's like, okay, let's play some Schranz. Okay. And what I described by that was essentially just a little bit more overdriven, not necessarily hard and heavy or fast, but overdriven music, like, well, probably hard, but not necessarily fast. Could be any tempo, but overdriven, crunchy, distorted music. I call it like Schranz. And somehow in Frankfurt, a record store owner, Boy Records, like, I don't know, half a year later, started to do one of his, what do you say, like
the genre thing.
The genre thing, and he put Schranz in it, and it was a genre. In Frankfurt, in the record store, was suddenly that genre Schranz had its own box where you could find Schranz records, which were mostly from England and mostly like that. But then this whole thing basically got out of my control, and obviously a lot of, like, especially DJ Rush, played this style of music, and there was a huge
Monica
following.
Also back in the days. Monica also back in the days.
Say again?
Monica also back in the days.
Yeah. Monica, Sven, everybody was playing. It was like sort of 144 BPM, super crazy, hard techno. It was a great time back then. And I think we sometimes made up a lack of energy in the production with the speed of the music, It's like, just pitch it up a little bit more. And then this whole Schranz thing became like, there were certainly compilations released from Zyx, I remember, Schranz compilation one. I should have at some point maybe just copyright that thing. But that's kind of how that came about, yeah.
But how do you see, especially when I look now into these new kids, and I mean, I signed some new artists, they're around 20 and they're doing like really hard music. I mean, even if you look to the new kids, it's kind of a same vibe. But how you feel about this, that this coming back and has this amazing hype? Are you happy? And
I'm happy if people are happy and then have a great time on the dance floor. I had a great chat with Kobosil about that.
Yes.
Because Kobosil was basically approaching me saying like, man, all your old Stigmata records, I play them all. Why don't you play them?
Yeah.
And I looked at him as like, because I did play them to death like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's 20 years ago and they don't really sound that great these days.
Yeah, but I think also even some of this, what they're producing, they're using a lot of distortion. It sounded, they want to sound like you did back in the days.
Yeah.
There. And it's quite interesting. But it's anyway interesting because you changed your sound quite a lot during all these years. What do you think? Was this for you, was costing some damage, or is it sometimes better to following the trend? Or just like play from your heart, what you want?
I think follow your heart is maybe the best description I could say. Obviously, you are not disconnected from your environment. So I think you're always influenced by trends. You cannot be, you have to live in a cave completely on your own and not have any contact to the outside world to be unaffected by trends. I openly admit I was affected by the minimal movement. Not that I really got into it, but it definitely, especially in the beginning of the 2000s, I think the minimal got really big in around 2003, 2004. Where I slowed down my tempo.
Yes.
But I felt like it was for me the right thing to do because I felt like I want to express a little bit more through music. And if you have a little bit more space between the bass drums, and if you slow down the track, you have more space between the bass drums. You can put more groove in it. And I mean, my first label that I was co-owning together back then with Andre Walter and Tony Rios was Soap Records. And we did house. I mean, my first releases were basically house records. We had, like, if some of you want to Google that, Marshall Jefferson versus Noosa Head's Mushrooms, like that was 95, 96, So,
what a song, honestly.
and also with my background of not playing techno, I kind of have this various music background, of the kid from the 80s. So the hard techno was just one side of me that just happened in a time where I became pretty famous, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So that got connected with me. And it was fun. But at some point, and this is what I basically told Kobosil too, it's because he asked me, how long can we do this? How much faster does it get? He's really smart.
Yeah.
And I said, do it as long as it's fun, but you have to always know at some point you will stand there and you might want to play a slower track because you're kind of sick and tired of that and it's getting faster and getting faster and getting faster. And then you will see people in the audience in front of you not happy. And that's where you're going to run into a little issue because then you made your name for a certain sound, but you don't you don't feel that anymore and you want to do something different. You have to be willing to piss off people.
Of course.
And maybe even have a dip in your career because you can't go on forever like this because you cannot continue to play music that you're not into. And the reasons why you're not into that music could be many. It could be that you're following trends consciously, or it could be that you're unconsciously following trends, which I think mostly happens. And then you just have to pull through. And then the minimal movement came in and I started to slow down my tempo and I went through a kind of let's say, difficult phase. Let's say I had some shoes thrown at me in Spain. I had a lot of middle fingers.
Really?
I had a lot of middle fingers in front of me.
Yes, I can imagine.
I think,
you have to have balls to do this, But what I read in one interview, and I found it so interesting, that you had even this love for minimal music, but you didn't play it or you hate it somehow, but you were able to see some your taste from the sound, which I found really amazing that you can do this. And are you still doing this? Do you still have some sound where you're thinking, oh my God, it's nice, but it's absolutely nothing for me. It's not my taste, but you can absorb something from this.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much great music out there, especially also in techno or in electronic music, that I really, really enjoy listening to, or other DJs are playing it, but I could never play it myself. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah, of course.
And I have that a lot.
But do you think even after the crisis, when everything, do you think the music will change and maybe we will change, or you are able to play then different music?
Oh, wow. That is a great that's a really, really good question right now, because
I'm not sure after this
so,
if this techno or maybe even like this afterlife sound, we are all, it's crazy times. I don't know. What do you think?
Where do I start? I was pretty happy where I was musically, like last winter. You know, there was great music out. I'm not really the guy who looks for new music every day, like 10 hours. Let's put it that way. You know, it's like there's other people who are so good at that. I sometimes rely on my improvisation skills, and I go to gigs. Oh, I didn't find any new music this week, but I would go to gigs and I try to recreate the music in a different way. That's why my setup allows me to like put loops on top of each other and do something different with the same music that I have, which is sometimes a good thing because you can be very unique, but sometimes it's also a bad thing because it's kind of like, you know what, I'm too lazy today for looking for new music. I can still push it another weekend, you know?
Of course.
But you know, as all DJs know, you need some new music to be like excited about. And even if it's like one or two great tracks you put into your set, it's going to be just, this is exciting. So then the lockdown comes. And what's happening with the music? There's no clubs, there's nothing. That's why I find your question so amazing. So we do these streams and you play the music for yourself. You don't really have the reaction of the crowd, but you kind of feel it. So I did all these streams during my lockdown, these all alone together streams. In case some of you might have missed it, you can find them on my YouTube channel. But I've done long streams. I did, I think, 8-9 hour streams and stuff like that. Just played music and I really enjoyed that. And it's funny, but during the summer, I came to a point, like just recently, basically, let's say like 2 days ago, like I was kind of fed up with that music. And I was literally sitting in the train because yesterday, I'm in Berlin, by the way, because yesterday I played at a Ricketts party, Radio Slaves label, at Griesmühle open air location. And I was sitting in the train coming from Frankfurt, and I literally deleted my playlists in the train 2 days ago.
No, this is
so
amazing.
much for your question. How much is the music changing during the lockdown? I was like, this is new now. This is old music. It's great music, but I'm done with it. And I've just played them enough in my streams. Now I've played them, you know. No, and I just literally deleted everything.
Wow.
I gathered new music in the last 2 weeks because with me it always works like I know something is coming up and subconsciously I'm preparing for that. So I find myself 10 days ago, you know, being on the Hardware side and looking for new music and, you know, you just subconsciously. So I got some new music and luckily I have some great DJ friends as well who sent me their new music. And I was just like, okay, in my train ride to coming to Berlin 2 days ago, I decided I'm deleting my old playlists and I'm just going to start brand new. And with this brand new, because the music, I need new music. I need to restart, and that's what I did yesterday, and it luckily worked out for me. I was really happy with the new tracks I was playing. I was literally playing music I didn't really listen to.
It's so funny that you say this, that you need something new, because when I look to your career or when you're talking, I mean, there was a lot of changes in your career, exactly. Yeah. We could all recognize it, but I would not call it changes. I would call it more development. Yeah. So which is quite interesting, and I know the feeling that after a time you need a change, you need a different surrounding and stuff like this. But interesting is then, is there any plan maybe what you're going to increase next, or you want to surprise us with something?
I have no idea. I really don't know. Like yesterday,
did you have an idea before when you did the changes?
I don't think I've ever had an idea of what I'm like what I want to do or where I want to get at. It's just like you try something and it works for you. You feel it, then it's good. You continue that. But if you don't have an audience in front of you, it's so hard to like. You know, is it me? Am I feeling this? Of course, it's mostly necessary you feel it, but it also needs to work in a functional level, you know, in a club. And you don't have that right now. Yeah. So yesterday, you know, I had no idea what I'm going to be doing. But then Matt, Radio Slave, was playing before me. And when he stopped, he was at 134 BPM. Wow. And I was like, oh, apparently I play 134, 135 BPM now. Because I don't want to turn down the tempo now. And it worked. And now I can tell you, maybe right now I'm at a harder pace of techno right now, apparently. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Just one thing, coming back to your latest album, 2018 is already 2 years ago. It feels like, I had a feeling it was just some months ago, Burn Slow on Mute.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
This was a dream label of
my God,
just a little sentence.
We do a whole show only about my love for Mute records.
I really loved this album, which was also quite interesting because you produced it with Ralf Hildenbeutel, also an old guy from Frankfurt, IQ Hard House back in the days. Yeah. Different connections. So I find it quite interesting, your approach to sounds, and even you open up a little bit for melodies. Can I say this without?
Yes.
So how was this process? I mean, it was probably quite hard for you because it was also for me feeling like it changed somehow.
Yes.
Develop.
Yeah, but what looks to the outside sometimes for a change, you probably know that inside it's happening quite a long time within you, Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the 80s with the music, with The Cure and Depeche Mode and all that stuff. Mute was probably most influential label without knowing, because back in the days when you were a kid in the 80s, you weren't really looking like what label. Like I wasn't such a label nerd that I was looking at the records like what label is it coming from. But I can tell that anyone who's like between 35 and 55 right now has been influenced by Mute records.
Oh, time.
Insanely. Like if you look at the catalog, like Nick Cave, Erasure, New Order, obviously Depeche Mode, Yazoo. I mean, it's insane. But also on the more underground side, a certain ratio, and all that stuff. So it's such an influential label, and I've always been a big fan. In 2006, I released with Speedy J together on Nova Mute this album Metalism. So there was a connection with Nova Mute already, and I remember I met Daniel Miller in 2006, like very briefly. Who is the boss of Mute, and who is the person who founded Mute? Who's the person who discovered Depeche Mode, and who's the person our lives would be so fucking boring by now. And I remember in 2013, I got more and more. Somehow Daniel Miller started to DJ as well. We ended up playing a lot of the same events. We ended up having dinners together. We have a good relationship with each other. And in 2015, I kind of felt like, it was kind of like I had my CLR label was doing quite nicely. I had a great crew of artists together. It was a fun time, but I kind of felt like I want to do something different now. And so I'm not a musician. I've never learned to play any instruments. I can do some grooves. I can't read notes. But I still felt like I want to do some music, not just techno. Let's not say techno is no music, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so I need someone who is a musician and who understands me. And then my first thought was like Ralf Hildenbeutel. And that is a pretty insane thing because we earlier on spoke about like how IQ influenced our lives musically. And Ralf was basically one of the biggest forces, producers behind IQ. He made all these big IQ hits back in the 90s, which basically brought me to techno.
And we're just going to play it right now from the new kids already again.
Yes,
This is so funny. They're still on the point. You can't do it better, actually.
You can't do it better. And it's like, I recommend for all of you listening, just like after you listen to this, like go on YouTube and find the old IQ. There's samplers. Just listen to this. Just listen to the sonic experience, the melodies. It's quite fast at times. It's like between 140, 150, 160 BPM sometimes. But it's like, wow. So, and there's a lot of music in there too, because it's produced by guys who were really musicians. Ralf is a big piano player since the age of 9 and everything. And so I asked Ralf, would you help me do an album? And he was like, sure, why not? Let's do an album. And I found out he was just basically living a 3-minute bike ride for me.
Sometimes it's so easy, no?
I was like, that's great. So we met up and we started making music together, and I felt like I can try different things with him, and that's how this album then came about, And then obviously my connection with Daniel got more and closer, and at some point I felt like, Daniel, I made some new music with Ralf, and it's like not techno. Would you want to listen to it? And I mean that this then comes out on Mute Records was just I still don't understand why that actually happened.
Wonderful. It was a great album. But you just talked about CLR, and I know a lot of people know you and are actually quite sad that it's not existing anymore. But maybe some people don't know that you was actually the technical head of everything, because you said you were not a musician, but you were in the end producing all your artists, helping them. And this was a time where it was a little bit quiet about yourself. And now you're back. I see you're doing more remixes. I just had a remix from Dubfire. You did your album. So first question I had, some people wrote me, can you please ask Chris if CLR is coming back?
I'm actually planning on that.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Yes, I'm actually planning on that. I definitely have ideas for this. I'm super motivated about it too. It took me a while. I mean, essentially, the Burn Slow album was the reason I kind of put it on ice because I needed the time, and
for yourself.
I couldn't find the way forward either, and it was just like, so I told all. It was kind of like overnight decision. I told all the artists, like, take your music, go somewhere else, please. I love you all, but I need my time now. So I put that on ice because of that project. And you're right. I'm not a musician, but I would say I'm a mixing engineer. I know sounds and I know how to work with the technology when it comes to mixing. And I know one or two things about synthesizers and stuff like this.
That's super.
So, and I'm a real fanatic about sound. So I was really getting very involved into the production process of the artists that I was releasing on the label, up to a point that I mixed all the albums. And I even mixed the singles.
Like, you mixed everything.
It was so time consuming at the point, but it was so much fun too. And it's like, it's such a great thing to like
and
sculpt
it's sometimes
sounds.
a good thing to hide yourself as an own artist because you have so much things to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a great period, but I had to like move on from that, and then I had this time with Ralph.
Are you missing the crew, actually, because you were a really close crew? You had amazing artists around you, and CLR was always, when they were coming to your party, they were all looking great. Girls and boys, everyone. It was always a good thing.
It was a great crew, and they were disappointed that I made that move, and I understand that, but it was kind of like a necessary move.
Yes, I know.
And but by now I feel like I can restart it.
Yeah, that's a good plan for the future. Okay, there's one last topic I wanted to talk with you, because you're an old radio host. You do your podcast nearly same time that I do it. And now we get forced, and there are some interesting platforms nowadays. And I read you did the Mixcloud Select, where the people have to pay. And we have Patreon, and we have even other platforms. How do you think about this? Are you thinking to release something special where fans have to pay for listening to it?
I'm already doing that.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful, because I'm not paying anything for this. Can you explain? And what is the advantage? Or do you do special there?
Not many people know this because I didn't really promote it yet, because it's still kind of a test phase. But I mean, the technology, this is what we're all kind of looking for, right? Is to find a fair way for artists to being paid. Right, especially in times like these, where you, like when we all were on tour, you know, all these things were just like it was not a priority. You know, you made enough kind of money with your touring. Like the productions are a side note, and because you mentioned early on, like people like Herbert Grönemeyer, all these superstars that we have in Germany, and the whole GEMA system. I mean, there were times that probably discotheques where you were DJing or techno nights, they played their part of GEMA or MCPS or whatever you want to call it. And because you could not allocate the people who own the rights for this music that we were playing, if you can't allocate the rights, the money goes to the ones who earn the most, which are, again, in return, like people like Herbert Grönemeyer. So they actually got our money, which is so unfair. So in times like these, you know, I think with the technology is there by now that music can get analyzed. You know, just look at Shazam; it can be placed, and I think especially when it comes to Mixcloud Select or similar platforms, the way it works is you put up a mix there, the mix gets analyzed, the tracks come out, and they have contracts with all those labels, and they know how many times this gets downloaded. For example, in my case, I ask for €4 a month if you want to become a Mixcloud Select member.
Yes.
And if you are a Mixcloud Select member, you get all my radio shows without me talking. You get my streams, which are mastered for your headphones. You can download it again on your phone, which, you know, never was possible again with iTunes. It used to be possible. It's you know. And the great thing about it is, from these €4 that you're paying, and every artist involved on any level gets his fair share, you know? And the more people would join something like that, not necessarily my platform, there's all sorts of artists are joining platforms like this, it would be a fair way to distribute the money to everyone who's involved in that process, you know. And I think that's very important, and we should work on this stuff way more, and people should start to realize again that consuming music is not essentially for free, you know.
No,
it's
and
not.
The entertainment industry has to survive.
Yes.
Yeah, this was great. And we already talked about an hour, which is no, this is wonderful. It was not, I loved it. But I have to come to an end. Just a little thing. Don't forget to watch the DJs and Beers, what was invented also from you. Yeah? This is amazing. It's a little talk show with 4 DJs and always a guest. It's Truncate, Drum Cell is Chris, of course, Radio Slave and Dubfire. And then they invite.
And we always have guests. So sometimes we have no guests,
And it's really funny. I've been on the show. It's amazing.
And we talk.
Thank you so much for this really nice and honest talk. So, thank you for all these years you've been there for even support me. I remember he booked me first. My Ibiza first gig was booked by Chris Liebing. So I always be thankful. Okay, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. Isn't that an amazing scene we're in? That since in 25 years we became such a great family and we're there for each other. It's amazing to see. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Tschüss.
Club Room Backstage.
Produced at Blackout Studios.